No, Miss Graham.
The next witness will be former Inspector Mr. Stephen Kay.
And he's giving evidence remotely.
He is, yes.
Good morning, Mr. Kay.
Good morning.
You can hear me and see me, can you?
Yes, certainly can.
Thank you. You're going to be asked some questions by Miss Graham, Senior Counsel to the inquiry. Before that, I wonder if you would raise your hand and say the words of the oath after me. I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that I will tell the truth,
I will tell the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Now, Miss Graham.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Kay. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly.
Excellent. You are Stephen Kay, and you're a former
Yes.
inspector with Police Scotland.
Yes.
What age are you?
53.
And do I understand correctly that you're retired?
Yeah, I left the police in May.
How many years in service did you have when you left the police?
Just short of 26.
Thank you. As I understand it, in advance of today, you've been sent some paperwork which you can have in front of you as we go through some questions today. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes, I have it here.
And I'll go through those quickly just to make sure you have them. There was an operational statement which you had, and we can show that on the screen. It's PS 00345. And you should also have a hard copy.
Yeah, I've got that.
And that's an undated statement that was prepared by you.
Yeah.
We can also see it on our screens here in the hearing room, Mr. Kay. Can you see that?
No, I could only see me twice.
Right. It's not working. All right. Well, as long as you have the hard copy in front of you, that's
Yeah,
more
I've
important.
got that.
And I noted in your inquiry statement, which I'll come to in a moment, at paragraph 109, that you said you prepared that within a week after the events of the 3rd of May 2015.
Yes, obviously it's not documented or articulated, but me being me, I would definitely would have done that quite sharp, but it was still close to memory and knowing that I would probably get asked for it.
So although it doesn't have a date on it, it was done within a week of the events of the 3rd of May 2015.
Yeah, I could probably say that's almost a guarantee.
Thank you. And when you prepared this statement, were you doing your best to be as accurate in your recollection and to tell the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. If there's anything in this statement that is different from what you say today, I understand from your inquiry statement at paragraphs 109 and 110 that you would prefer the chair to rely on your statement.
Yes, because probably that would be more, I would think, would be more reflective than this one 6 years later.
We've heard other witnesses say, because it was closer to the time and the events, the chair should probably prefer that one.
Yeah.
Good. And then we have a second document, a PERC statement, PERC 00271. We'll see this on our screens in the hearing room, but again, you should have a hard copy.
Yeah, I've got that.
And that was a statement dated the 12th of January 2017 at 12:35. If we maybe just move down the screen slightly. And it was taken by a DSI, William Little, in the presence of SI John McSporran at Cowdenbeath Police Office. So that was nearly 2 years later. Do you remember giving that statement to the PERC?
I can vividly remember that because I was in a moon boot on light duties at my work.
So did you go in to give that statement at Cowdenbeath
No.
Police Office?
I went back to my work early because I was out of crutches on a moon boot, and I was able to facilitate going to Cowdenbeath Police Station as opposed to where I did work, and they just made contact and came and see me then.
Thank you. And again, when you spoke to the PERC, did you do your best to be accurate in your recollection and to tell the truth?
Yes.
You've said in your inquiry statement, which we'll come to in a moment, at paragraph 120, you were surprised at how quick it was. You say, I was surprised how quick it was, put it that way, at how quickly the PERC took this statement. Do you want to add anything else to that comment?
No, I was just under the impression that other people were in for a fair length of time, and I was surprised how quickly they spoke to me about it.
All right, thank you. Let's look now at your inquiry statement. So we'll have that on our screen. It's SBPI 00036. Do you have that in front of you?
Yes.
And am I right in saying that the copy you have has a signature by you on each page?
Yeah, it has.
And it's 24 pages long. And if you could look at the last page, do we see that you signed it on the 26th of April this year?
Yes.
And if we look at the last paragraph, 129, it should say, I believe the facts stated in this witness statement are true. I understand that this statement may form part of the evidence before the inquiry and be published on the inquiry's website. And you understand that? And
yeah, that's correct.
Thank you. In addition, am I correct in saying that you've been provided with a spreadsheet in A3 format, which is the combined audio and visual timeline, SBPI 00047? Do you have that as well?
Yes.
Good. And have you had an opportunity to have a look through that and see how it's laid out? You'll see timings on the column on the left and descriptions and of what was said over the airwaves and descriptions of what's in the CCTV.
I had a brief look through it last night, yes.
Lovely, thank you. When we come back to that, I'll take you through the sections I'm interested in. First of all, I'd like to ask you some questions about the role of senior officers that were in charge at Kirkcaldy Police Office in May 2015. And if we start at paragraph 7 of your inquiry statement, you say that on the 3rd of May you were a temporary inspector in a role as a P.I.O.
Yeah.
Is that a police incident officer?
Yes.
What did you do in that role?
In that role, basically, the P.I.O. would be responsible or run the daily business for the division, make sure resources and every incident was facilitated, obviously grading them as appropriate. If any other stations were low on staff, you can move people around and go to the incidents, secure it, get evidence, put locus protection on, etc. And thereafter, if need be, you would then make contact with the specialist resources. But a big part of it was daily business and making sure there was enough resources if you had to change shifts or give annual leave, etc.
And were you a temporary inspector at that time?
Yeah, I'd been in that role from November. I was currently waiting on an interview to hopefully get promoted.
And that was in November 2014?
Yeah.
Had you had special training to do the role of P.I.O?
You get offered the opportunity to go shadow PIOs. I shadowed 2 or 3, get a flavour of how everyone works, to see what would suit best to me. But in previous roles as community sergeants, I would deputise for the community inspector, so I had a fair bit of exposure to what the role contained.
How long had you been the P.I.O at Kirkcaldy Police Office by the 3rd of May 2015?
I went there in the November. I was originally going to go to Team 1, but then I was moved to Team 4. So I was there, and that was my base station since November. And I had a colleague who worked out of Dunfermline. We could float around and attend other stations to be visible, but Kirkcaldy was my base station from November.
As you've explained, you were on a temporary promotion. Who was your senior officer?
At the station, I think it's now Chief Super Shepherd. It was a DCI. Nicky Shepherd was my immediate boss in the station.
Describe what role Chief Inspector Stones had in relation to your work in Kirkcaldy.
Every weekend you'll have an on-call rota of on-call super, on-call DI for any sort of crime-related crime, and Chief Inspector Stones, it was obviously his slot for being on the rota to look after P Division, or his level. It might have been a bit further for the whole of the East, but he was certainly overseeing anything, if required, that I would need to pass up to him.
So he was there on the 3rd of May 2015 as your senior officer.
Yeah, he worked out the college. As I say, it's on a rota. I don't know what they would do, 1 in 5, 1 in 7. So I would change every time. But it just so happened that he was on that day.
Where was he based on the 3rd of May?
He was working out of Tillyalan Police College. So I'm positive I phoned him there, then he made his way through later.
So initially, at least, the contact you had, was it over Teams or was it over the telephone?
So after I would get my handover from the night shift, I would look at what was happening, what was sort of sensitive, what was required immediate attention, speak to my sergeants to get a flavour of what they had to make sure my resources were accurate. I would then phone any chief inspector who was working with me at the time to let them know where I was, my contact number, and what was happening, and if they had anything they wanted me to concentrate resources on.
And so on the 3rd of May, the senior officer was CI Stones.
Yes.
Can I ask you to look at paragraph 17 of your inquiry statement, please? You were a senior officer.
Yeah.
You had a station inspector and a community inspector, and there was an inspector on the CID, and there was a chief inspector. I'm wondering if you can help me understand all the different roles that were in play that day in Kirkcaldy Police Office.
So the family tree, if you like, at Kirkcaldy would be chief inspector. You would have a community inspector. You would have me looking after a team or so as P.I.O, and you would have your dedicated divisional inspector for the CID. On that day, it was just myself, and Colin Robson was on. It must have been his weekend rota shift as well.
So we've heard other evidence about Colin Robson. Was he the inspector that day at the CID?
Yeah, he was the on-call DI for the division as well.
Right. We've also heard mention of a Samantha Davidson. Do you remember her role that day?
Yeah, she was DS. Can't recall if she was temp DS or DS, but she was certainly on.
Thank you. And you were the P.I.O. And who was the station inspector?
The community inspector at that time was retired as well. Alan Seath. So you would have him, he would be combined community and station inspector at that time, but he was Monday to Friday.
So if someone's referring to the station inspector that day, it's also the community inspector. It wasn't two separate
Yeah.
officers.
No.
Right, thank you. And you've said that you were running the daily business, or had charge of the daily resources. What did that actually
Yes.
mean?
Well, when I come on, I get my handovers from the night shift, and they hand me a running log, and I would check it before I came back, and I would make sure I had sufficient resources. I would speak to with resource management to see if there's any inquiries from out with, from mutual aid. I would check, then I would check the calls. I would go through the log with the night shift, as I say, if anything was needing attention, any one was needing relieved at locust protection, or we had priority engagements we had to go. And once I was comfortable with all that, I would phone round all my sergeants after their sort of morning meetings to ensure that it correlated with what I had. I would phone the CI to give him an update on everything under his umbrella. Then I would get prepared and go to the morning meeting, then discuss what I've just said to you and allocate appropriate tasking.
How many sergeants were you in charge of in May 2015?
If everybody was on, I think there's 6.
Did they all cover different teams?
No, the team 4 as a whole would be on throughout P division. So you would have one at Leavenmouth, you would have one at Cooper or St Andrews, Kirkcaldy, Glenrothes, so that's 4. And you could have had the West up into 3. So there would be a definite 6, potentially 7.
Right. Who was the sergeant in charge of Team 4?
That day was Scott Maxwell.
And we've heard that he was an acting police sergeant at that time.
Yes.
How familiar were you with the people within Team 4?
I didn't know hardly any of them at all. Went to the Kirkcaldy area, went in blind, which at the time I was happy with. Obviously it was a new challenge. I'd worked at most stations. I hadn't really worked out with Kirkcaldy. So I just knew people by face, but I didn't personally know any of them, or I hadn't worked with any of them.
How familiar were you with their experience? We've heard, for example, that PC Tomlinson and PC Good were probationers, and PC McDonough was new in the job.
Yeah, I think PC Donna had only come in literally 2 or 3 weeks. PC Good, I'm sure, joined not long after I went to the team, so she could only had a couple of months. I'm sure PC Tomlinson was almost coming out of his, if not just out. And obviously I just checked the profiles, and I know that there was a couple of cops with 20 years or roundabout service. Then you would have the in-between.
You've described in your statement that you were aware of PC Short. She'd only been in the response team for a matter of weeks.
Yes, when I was Glenrothes sergeant, just as I was moving to become custody sergeant, she came to my old team, so I was aware of her within the station.
You have said you'd been based in Kirkcaldy since the previous November. Had you often sent the response team 4 out on calls as part of your duties?
That's the sergeant's job. I oversee the whole division, so the sergeants are trusted to run their own team and to run their own resources, as long as it's to the acquired standard or things are getting done properly, or they're attending in a system that they should be. And if that's the case, they get allowed to run their teams, and I'm there for advising and to oversee things.
So Acting Police Sergeant Maxwell was running the team, but you had oversight at that time?
Yeah, of all areas, east, in northeast, east, the west, and Kirkcaldy. All sergeants would do their briefing and put out their teams appropriately, and I would be the top of the umbrella, overseeing everything that was happening.
And your duties presumably kept you mainly based in the police office rather than out on the streets?
Yeah, there was opportunities to go out, hand over shifts or serious incidents that required me to be visible or experience. But a lot of my role at that time was dealing with police complaints, other memos, other paperwork. You can imagine 7 sergeants would be sending you daily requests or memos, and also I could watch the calls coming in from our call handling system. So it would allow me to make sure if anything was flagged up that the sergeants had a grip of it.
So you could see, could you see the storm call cards as calls had come into ACR?
Yes.
And did you have that on a system in front of you, a screen in front of you as you were in the office?
Yes. I generally had 2 screens, and I would keep the call card up, isolated on the one screen at all times.
And would that be the call card for all the areas that you had under your command?
Yeah.
We've heard that the duty inspector at ACR on the 3rd of May 2015 was Inspector Stewart. Do you remember him?
I actually don't recall if it was that certain inspector, but I was one of the few inspectors when I came on. I used to phone ECR and let them aware that was me on duty for however many days. But their shift system is different to ours. I've certainly worked with him before, as is others.
Could we look please at paragraph 52 of your inquiry statement? You say here that you phoned the chief inspector, am I right? And so I phoned Chris Stone. Whilst I was on the phone to him, if I recall, I'm sure the call came in that there was a man with a knife. So I'm speaking to him and I was watching it. I was listening to radio transmissions from Bilston Glen at the time. Bilston Glen is our ACR. So from what you've said this morning, you have on your screen the call cards from Bilston Glen on your screen, showing the incidents that are coming in, and you're on the phone to the Chief Inspector, Chris Stone, who's your sort of senior officer on that day. He's on duty. Could you describe to us, please, what you were discussing at that time with Chief Inspector Stones?
As previously stated, it would be all morning business. What my strategy or tactics for that day would be our priority suspects, if we had any missing people, any sudden deaths, just a daily business. Ensure he was comfortable with my vision for how the journey of the shift was going to go, or if he knew anything or had any tasking that I wasn't aware of.
When you saw the call come in about the man with a knife, do you remember what time that was?
I don't. Without looking, it would be after the briefing, I would imagine between 7:12, 7:20 maybe.
Right. Without going to your operational statement, if I say to you at that time you estimated it about 7:15 in the morning, would you say that was about right?
Yeah, because I used to start doing my phone calls about 7:20. I would allow the sergeants to do had to do in the morning, then I would phone round for the catch-up. But in between that, I would phone the Chief Inspector first to see if he had anything pressing that I could relate to them. So that would be roughly one sort of morning, 2 times day shift routine.
When the call came in and you saw it on the screen, did you speak to Chief Inspector Stone about that call?
Yeah, I would definitely would have said to him, that's a call card came in alleging a man with a knife or a knife incident.
What do you remember about his response to that?
I can't recall. I would imagine it would just be professional, keep me updated, or there's every chance he would have linked into it as well. Because obviously that's high priority. Anything like that, he would definitely be having an interest.
We've heard other officers call it a high risk incident, and we understand that at different points in time calls were graded grade 1, which we understand is the sort of top grade in terms of immediate risk to life. Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
What went through your head when you saw that incident come in on your screen?
Well, my initial reaction would be get the veracity of it, to get the context of it, and to find out how it was articulated. A lot of calls that come in with knives or sort of 90-odd-year-old misspairs or 3 or 4-year-old misspairs, some are not accurate. So I would be listening in for ACR and the sergeant's grip, and I would need more information before I got involved, if required.
Now, just so that people understand what you're saying, a mispair is a missing person. Is that right?
Yes.
And,
and not everything's as seen as per the call card. So, like anything, I would need more detail. I would need more articulation. I need to be more comprehensive.
you're not listening to the 999 calls as they come in. You're seeing what is on the storm cards on the screen.
Yeah, and sometimes that could come up, a knife incident, and that's it. And whilst the call taker's getting more, the call card would get updated as it was going. So as I say, I would need more information to find out the veracity and a bit more articulation so we can make a risk assessment and a guided judgment.
In your operational statement, you said that you immediately realised that this was a very serious report and officer safety and public safety was at risk. Do you remember that?
If I've said that, again without looking, I would imagine it was because there were multiple calls coming in and there would be a reason for that.
Well, let's look briefly at the operational statement. This is the one that's not dated. And if we can look at page 2, and it's paragraph 7, if I remember rightly. Yes, paragraph 7, so if you count down from the top.
7 from the top, or not from the
Yes.
start?
From the top.
Yeah.
I immediately realised that this was a very serious report of which officer safety and public safety was at risk. Let's look at the immediately preceding paragraph, so paragraph 6, just to put this into context. I then heard on radio transmissions that more calls had been received regarding this male brandishing a knife at vehicles and was, I think that should say, still walking about the streets, Hayfield Road armed. At this time I heard Acting Police Sergeant Maxwell request an armed response vehicle and dog unit to attend due to the severity of the reports. This request was not acknowledged, and it took several attempts to receive an acknowledgement stating contact was made. So just to be clear, you've told us about recognising the knife incident when it came on the screen. You're on the phone to Chief Inspector Stones, and here in your operational statement you talk about hearing radio transmissions as well. Are you listening to radio transmissions at the same time?
Yeah, I'd be attempt to do all three.
And that's the airwaves transmissions?
Yeah, my radio would be on always. I'd be looking at the screen, and I was obviously on the phone at the time.
So you're on the phone. Your radio, is that on the desk or on your uniform?
I would be on the desk at that time. I didn't have my vest on.
And you've got 2 screens, I think you said, in front of you.
Yeah, one's just email, memos, anywhere else to go. Another one would have the call card up.
When you realised that this was a very serious report, were you still on the phone to Chief Inspector Stones at that time?
Yes.
And you've said in the preceding paragraph, paragraph 6 on your operational statement, you'd heard Acting Police Sergeant Maxwell make an airwaves transmission. Was that the point at time that you realised it was serious? Or was it just when you were looking at the screen?
Well, if we go back, as I've said to you, you need veracity depending on how the call card's been articulated. A lot of these things are isolated and they have one call card reference number. So if there's multiple calls coming in from the one area and they're almost verbatim or extremely similar, and we can hear things like that, yeah, that definitely changes the flavour of the picture, and you could almost guarantee that it is serious, and we would obviously be reacting to that. Even if it was only isolated and malicious or misconstrued, we would still send a unit. Mm-hmm. But when this is happening and so quick, that definitely changes the landscape.
You've talked about multiple or a number of calls coming in which were similar. What was your impression about the nature of these calls that were coming in? You've said they were similar.
Yeah, just that it was obviously a genuine call. There was obviously evidence to there to say that this was actually happening.
We've heard other evidence that because there were a number of calls from different people, that led certain officers to take the view that this was a genuine matter and not a malicious call.
Yeah, that's just what I've said, yes.
Yeah.
Obviously we attend a lot of things that they're not as they appear.
When you mentioned that they were similar, can you tell us what the similarities were as they appeared to you? Do you remember?
Not 100%, but I think it was just similar. Large male, white t-shirt, knife. I think I could recall maybe one taxi said that the male sort of lunged at the car, one car had to turn round. It was just a similar vein of nature in the same area.
Right. Were you aware of that area in Kirkcaldy?
Yeah, I know it, yeah.
Thank you. Can we go back to your inquiry statement, please, paragraphs 60 and 61? This is a section entitled Risk Assessment. There's a reference there to your operational statement at page 2. It says control allocated, that'll be ACR, allocated a single unit crewed by Tomlinson and Short to the call. Maxwell made himself known on the radio and requested that all available units attend in the immediate area to offer assistance. And on hearing this, I agreed with the rationale and risk assessment made by Maxwell. And you were asked at paragraph 61 what you meant by that. You also talked there about thinking about roadblocks, containment, negotiators, and anticipating the strategy. Can I ask you to what extent you agreed with the risk assessment made by Maxwell?
Well, as previously discussed, if the call cards came up initially, imagine EPS Maxwell has sent 1 unit, or ACR has, to go and see if there's anything in it, if there's any veracity. And back to discussing the multiple calls coming in, he's obviously took the decision that it'd be better if there were other units there, to which I agreed with. And obviously you would be looking at firearms because it was a knife incident, or the dog unit would be the best protocol to go. So yeah, just because of how these multiple calls were coming in, I agreed with him sending more responses.
So it would appear that in calling for all units, that in your view was it that it was a serious matter, and the sergeant acting that day, Sergeant Maxwell, was treating the matter seriously?
Yes.
You've said that the dog unit was the best call. What do you mean by that?
Well, it doesn't work on every occasion, but if you've got a highly agitated male or female and the dog turns up 99 times out of 100, you have a safe conclusion to that. They surrender any weapon they have and it de-escalates the situation.
And why is that?
Apart from layman's terms, having a snarling Alsatian looking at you, I couldn't answer that, to be honest.
All right, I think we get the picture. Thank you. And can I ask, did you have the authority to instruct things like roadblocks and containment and negotiators?
Yeah, that's my role to put these actions into place if the sergeant forgets or they miss it. But it was certainly my gift for a better way that I was running the division. So if I think the sergeant's not putting enough protective measures in, or maybe just misthought, if he's got 2 or 3 things on the go, yeah, it's my protocol to make the roads blocked off or secure the area, make it sterile, and get any other resources in mutual aid like dog unit or negotiators.
So at that time, Maxwell is seeking all units to attend, so further support for Tomlinson in short. Why, at that moment in time, did you not consider, in your role as overseer, seeking additional support for Tomlinson in short?
Well, he had asked for the dog and the ARV, but same again, I didn't have any further information. We didn't know if the male was still at Locus. We didn't know any of these facts. So he's just applying belts and braces, which I think is consistent with the volume of calls coming in, but we're still not there. We still don't have a clear picture.
Could I ask you to look at the spreadsheet that you have in front of you? And we'll look at page 2. And you'll see towards the left-hand side the time in the second column, 7:17:23.
Okay.
And this should be they've transcribed an airwaves transmission from Acting Police Sergeant Scott Maxwell. Do you see that?
Yep.
And this is the one where he says, I want all units to attend, that bearing in mind officer safety, is there an ARV and a dog as well?
Yeah.
So where you're sitting you thought that that was a reasonable strategy, and you agreed with his rationale, I think you said.
Yeah, as I say, we don't know what we're going to face, and there's every chance the ARV or the dog unit could be in Edinburgh, Stirling. So, as I say, it's probably belts and braces. They could be easy cancelled, and if they were required, at least to be en route to the area.
So you, having what you knew about the calls that were coming in from the screen and what you could hear on the transmissions, you agreed with Maxwell that all units should attend and that a dog was the best idea. And we've heard other evidence that if an ARV is to be deployed, that would have to be the duty inspector at the ACR, that he would have the authority to do that. Is that correct?
Yeah, same again. You have to put the request in, and B, we would have to realise or know what's involved. So, yeah, you would ask to get the wheels and motions to find out if there's actually one on duty and where they were situated. He would draw his attention to the call card. If the ACR inspector agreed, he would put wheels in motion to send them en route.
Thanks. You've mentioned the dog and that you could have requested that. So if Maxwell hadn't requested the dog, how would you have gone about making that request? Is that something you do yourself, or is it something you do through ACR?
No, I would ask ACR if there was a dog on duty, and just due to the way the calls are articulated, then they see if there's one available, and same again, put the wheels in motion. Because there's a lot of these things we go to and there's nothing in it, so the other units would get stood down and we could cancel the dog as well.
And is it easier to cancel specialist resources if you've got them en route than it is to get them to leave and be on the route?
It's not uncommon for me to have a misfire and in a wooded area and the dog's maybe the other side of the Leith. He's an hour and 10 minutes away. So sometimes it's not viable, but yeah, I would say a good tactic to at least find out where they are, see if they could start making inroads in.
Thank you. When this was happening, and you can hear Sergeant Maxwell making this request on the airwaves transmission, were you still on the phone to Chief Inspector Stones?
Yeah, I was still on the phone. I could remember it kind of escalated quickly, and I eventually said to him to keep an eye on the call card, presuming he'd be making himself in. I then got kitted up and made my way to Locust.
I'll come on to that in a moment. Did Chief Inspector Stones give you any advice about how to handle this situation?
Not that I could recall. I think he would have trust in me to do the basics, and I would update him when I had more information.
Did you seek any advice from Chief Inspector Stones at all?
I can't recall, to be honest, but I don't think so.
At that time, were you comfortable with your role and what was happening on the ground?
Yeah, because as I said, it happened so quickly, I hadn't even had time. I was still on the phone every time I had to get my vest and get kitted up. It was it obviously escalated right up. And from getting basic information to future shouts, it happened that quick. It was quite unusual.
Can I ask you about paragraph 53 before we leave this section of your statement? You say
This
here,
one,
in your inquiry statement, yes, sorry, it's at the bottom of page 9.
okay.
As inspector, everything has got to come through me, anything of a serious note. So I'm keeping the force and the officers safe. I'm thinking about scrutiny. I'm thinking about anything that's going to be coming through. So anything of a serious note, or in fact any call that comes in, I generally would look at. I'm interested in what you say about you're keeping the force and the officers safe. And I'm thinking about scrutiny. Can you give us a little bit more explanation?
Well, I think that's just framed different. I think it's previously what I've just said. I was in charge of daily business. So any integrity or force reputation, or if Dunfermline only had 4 staff when they should have 7 or 8, I would have to look after their safety and public safety, service delivery. I would have to ensure that everything was as should be. To look at mutual aid. Just what I said previously, I just think that's framed differently.
All right. Can I ask you to look at paragraph 57? And I'm
Yeah.
just going to ask you this because I think you might want to change it. You say then, I'm sure the transmissions got a bit more frequent, so it escalated a wee bit. And then I think when I asked for the dog in the ARV, there maybe wasn't any locally, because sometimes when you phone up the dog, might be in Edinburgh, might be in Stirling, depending on what it had been deployed to before. Now, I've just asked you to look at the spreadsheet, and it was actually Sergeant Maxwell that called for the dog in the ARV. And I wondered if maybe you'd want to correct your statement insofar as you suggested you called for the dog in the ARV.
My gut feeling to that would be, did they get a response from ACR? Because if they didn't, I would reiterate the request.
All right.
Or I have maybe missed him in the early mayhem, him saying it, and I would be asking for it. But all my sergeants were obviously knew what was expected, so one of the two. I'm assuming that ACR maybe not got back, and I've tried to push it on again.
We've certainly seen on the spreadsheet that Maxwell made that request.
Yeah.
And I'm going to come on to the other transmissions and you can listen to the other calls you made. But we can come back to this, Mr. Kay, if you prefer. But if I've not been able to find a call from you asking for the ARV and dog, and it really is just a minor matter, I just wanted to clarify with you.
Unless I've spoke to Scott by other means, because I think at some stage I asked for no point-to-points, keep it obviously for transparency. So I'll stand corrected if I've got it wrong, but either I've told him to do it through that or he has not been answered. But if it's not there, I've maybe not done it unless it's been over the phone or I left office.
We'll come on to, at the moment we'll come on to the other transmissions in a moment. Tell me about the point-to-point. We've heard some evidence about point-to-point calls where you're essentially speaking to one other officer, but it's not part of the record of airwaves transmissions that we have available. Were you on point-to-point with anyone that day?
Didn't answer that, to be honest. I would maybe generally if you're at something that's quite high intensity, point-to-point's good, or you're not taking up airspace, but at the same time you miss what's happening because it cuts it off. But when this was getting to its more critical stage, I asked for no points-to-points so that everything would obviously be in the air and would get transcribed.
So you have one radio that you can either hear all the airwaves transmissions or you can make a point-to-point call to an individual officer.
Yeah, it's just like a phone call. But if I do that, if I point-to-point you, we can't hear anything else. But as I say, for a sensitive nature, a domestic or something involving in drugs maybe, if you do point-to-point, like checks, there's nobody going to hear it. So you've not got any of that data protection or anything like that going out.
But you don't remember if you were doing point-to-point that morning?
As I say, normally if things were going to that intensity, I probably would on occasion, but I can't recall, obviously, it was a long time ago. And once it sort of ramped up a bit, then I've obviously asked for no point-to-point.
All right. At any stage, did you, either when you were on the call to Chief Inspector Stones or at that moment in time, did you consider declaring this to be a critical incident?
that has to come from the super rank, super or chief super, and it has to meet a certain criteria. But same again, when I was on the phone to Chief Inspector Stones at that time, we didn't have the full picture, so no, that was definitely not my thoughts.
And would you have had the authority to do that in any event from what you've just said?
No, I could declare to the ACR I was going to contact the super that I think this will be a critical, and basically what happened when I spoke to Gary McEwen.
But that wasn't till later.
Yeah, as I say, it's got to meet a certain criteria before it becomes a critical. Could be a large-scale community incident, or it could be a large-scale incident. But to hit the remit of that, it's got to come from super and above.
Okay. At any time, at this moment in time when you're at your desk, did you consider a PSU?
No, because we asked for the ARV, and they would be linked almost certainty to the PSU.
Thank you. Could we look at paragraph 71 of your inquiry statement? This is in relation to what you're seeing on the screen, on the storm cards. And it says if he's trying to slash vehicles, so it's about the man, if he's trying to slash vehicles on the way past, or he's trying to stab them or whatever he's doing, it's not rational behaviour. So you'll be thinking, what's the reason behind it? I'm interested in that paragraph. Can you tell us what your thought processes are there?
Well, as P.I.O, if the officer's at the end of the scene and I'm asking for an update, you're obviously, that is not rational behaviour in my opinion. So you'll be thinking of having a mental health episode, under the influence of drink or drugs, if they fell out with their partner, if they had a bereavement loss. So you'll be trying to link something together. It might help reason with the person, might give you advanced knowledge for what to do next.
Was that going through your head as a possibility just from the information you had on the storm cards?
Yeah, as I say, that's definitely not normal behaviour.
And when you said you'll be thinking what's the reason behind it, the reasons included it could be a mental health episode or he could be under the influence of something.
Yeah.
Can I ask you briefly about some training you've had?
Yeah.
I think we have your training records, and I won't go to them at the moment unless you want to clarify it, but you'd had training in June 2013 about critical incident decisions, silver command, response. Is that right?
Yeah.
And was this training that you'd had in anticipation of you doing the P.I.O role?
No, it was just sort of third level manager courses for inspectors, chief inspectors, but I actually attended them as a sergeant. I just went to try and give me an insight and help me for future interviews, etc.
And was that training about managing incidents, like knife incidents or any incident?
Yeah, it was more modular discussions about stress awareness, etc. Yeah, but it would be things like, if this happened, what would you do? I think it was the Glasgow incident at the airport that they used, and it was just more for learning and what was available to yourself.
Thank you. Could I ask you to look at the spreadsheet again, please? Now, if we turn to page 3, You'll see on the left-hand side at roughly about 7:20, 7:20, 13 to 21 seconds. Inspector Stewart is on airwaves making a transmission, saying that he's Inspector Stewart, area control room to the set, attending. I'm monitoring this obviously from an ARV perspective. If you get sightings of the male, you need to make an initial assessment yourself and feedback through straight away, and I'll listen out on the channel. Were you able to hear that message from Inspector Stewart?
Yeah, I would imagine so.
And then we've heard that shortly before the conclusion of that message, that Walker and Payton arrive in a transit van at Hayfield Road. That's actually at 7:20:23. If you go down the timings, you'll see it says police van stops at Hayfield Road. Do you see that?
What time's that at?
7:20 and 23 seconds.
I've got 7:20:06, 7:20:13, 7:20:35. Oh,
Are you on-
23. Yeah, sorry.
Have you
Sorry,
got
I'm in
it?
the wrong column. Yep, I've got
No,
it.
no problem. The first column's the time, and the second column is if there's an airwaves transmission, that's the precise time. But that's
Okay.
so. This is the moment in time where the first two officers arrive at the scene, and it's PC Walker and PC Payton.
Yeah.
And what I'd like to do is play a sort of less than 3-minute clip of this. It's going to come on the screen, and
Okay.
you'll see the CCTV at the bottom of the screen, and you'll also hear the airwaves transmissions. And during this time, I think, if all goes well, you should be able to hear yourself making transmissions as well. So we'll play roughly 3 minutes of that. If you have a difficulty seeing it, will you let me know? Will you say? We'll put it on the screen now, and we'll see if you can actually see it. So
Yeah, I can see it.
have you got that now? So you'll see at the bottom there's the CCTV from the nearby Gallagher's pub.
Yep.
You may have seen some of this already, Mr. Kay. We've used this with other witnesses. At the top left-hand corner, there's a real-time clock, which at the moment is on 7:19:37. Do you have that?
Okay. Yeah.
And then you'll see underneath that, there's sort of buttons, 101 calls, 999 calls, and a green button that's lit that says airwaves. So that's on when airwaves transmissions are being made. But once we play it, you'll probably be able to hear it. Now I'd like us to go to 7:20 and as close to 52, 56 as we could get to. That's fine. Anywhere there is absolutely fine. So you'll have seen that. You maybe noticed that van coming into the screen. You see the reconstruction tile in the top of the screen in the middle.
Yep.
That's a bird's eye view from a 3D model. So we'll play this until 7:23 and 49 seconds, and then I'll come back and I'll ask you questions. But you should be able to hear the audio at the same time, all right?
To make an initial assessment yourself and feedback to me straight away, and I'll listen out on the channel.
Control for Bravo, do we have a description? I missed it. He's described as male, black, well-built, 6 foot tall, wearing a white t-shirt, dark coloured jeans and carrying a very large knife.
India 4, control, keep off, that's somebody activated the emergency button.
Officer injured! PC shot! Male! Control acknowledge, officer injured. What's the locket? We've just got blue lights stopped, Jason to Gallagher, we're approaching. Thank you! Control Bravo, one officer's been punched in the back of the head, no obvious serious injuries. Male secure on the ground. 30 seconds out, 4-1.
It's Maxwell. If you're alive, you didn't give me an update, please.
Papa Whiskey 101, we're just approaching, I'll give you an update.
Update, Bill! I'm just still struggling.
Control. Control from 411.
We've got one fax message here and therefore I'm sure control listening.
Well, the males on the ground at the moment, we've got several officers that have taken a big restraint. We'll get back to you. However, we're going to need more control with like restraint, etc. But down on the ground, well, there's no risk at the moment.
Yes, yes, but I got an update on an injury.
For 401, piece of shot's been struck to the head. And we're upset. I'm going to need a ambulance here, check her over. No bleeding, no visible injury.
Yes, yes, just continually to stay safe and keep full control. Use all restraints necessary. Control, could you get an ambulance please for a PC shot?
Roger.
Were you able to hear those airwaves transmissions as we played that segment?
Yep.
Excellent.
Yep.
Can we go back to page 4 of the spreadsheet and I'll ask you some questions about your transmissions, if I may.
Yeah.
So towards the top of page 4, you'll see in the second column the time 7:20:56. And it says, from India 4 control, keep off that somebody activated the emergency button. How were you able to realise that someone had activated the emergency button? I think if we see just on the bottom of page 3, we see that that was PC Alan Payton's emergency button was switched on at 7:20:42, and then you come on at 7:20:56 and essentially acknowledge that an emergency button's been pressed. How could you know that?
Your radio vibrates and the button on top red and it makes a noise.
Right. And then what was going through your head then once you realised that someone had pressed their emergency button?
Immediately just keep the airwaves clear so we could get a better update.
Can you tell when your radio vibrates whose emergency button has been pressed?
I don't think the personal radio does, but I think ACR can.
But that's not information that's available to you.
Not that I could recall.
That's fine. And then, are you carrying on listening to these transmissions as you sit at your desk?
I would think I would be in motions of trying to go to Locus at this time.
Well, let's look at the next transmission you make, which I think is on page 5. And you'll see 7:21:55.
Okay.
It says, P.S. Maxwell, that's Sergeant Maxwell, can you arrive there and give me an update, please? Where were you when you made that transmission?
I'm not 100% sure, but I would probably guess somewhere in between getting my kit on and making myself to the backyard for a vehicle if they're speaking to sea ice zones.
And then Samantha Davidson responds, indicating we're just approaching and I'll give you an update. So she appears to be responding to your transmission.
Yeah.
And then if we turn to page 6, at 7:23:10, you say 411 passed the message here, India 4, control, I'm listening. We don't have a clear transcription of that. Do you remember anything else that you said?
On hearing it there, same again, I don't think he's had a reply to something, and I've said, pass it here, control will be listening. They're probably doing some other tasks, but whatever it was, I would be able to note the details or I would be aware of it.
And then at 7:23:30, you make a transmission. Yes, can I get an update on any injury? What was going through your head at that time?
Well, I think they've said that there's an officer down and we're still struggling with the mail. So I want to know if there's any injury to any officers or any member of the public.
All right. You're absolutely right. On page 4, at 7:21:02, you'll see it says officer injured, PC short mail.
Yeah.
And then at the top of page 5, PC Smith has said, one officer's been punched to the back of the head, no obvious serious injury.
Yeah.
So you're then seeking an update on any injuries at that time on page 6. I think I was on.
Yeah.
And that was at 7:23:30. And then at 7:23:49, you say, yes, just continually to stay safe and keep full control. Use all restraints necessary. Control, can you get an ambulance, please, for PC short?
Yes.
Why were you asking for an ambulance for PC short? Why did you have to ask for an ambulance?
Same again, if somebody's asked and it's not been sort of responded to, positive that I heard that she was maybe going to need one. Scott Maxwell says before, so I've asked for an ambulance for her because she's injured and it's been previously requested, and I'm obviously still not aware if there's an injury to anyone else at this stage.
Having heard that PC short has been struck on the head, was that an indication that an ambulance was required?
Yeah, I think I'm just reiterating what Scott Maxwell or DS Davison had already said. Same again, I'm presuming in amongst all this intensity that controls not give them sufficient answer.
What concerns did you have about the communication from control?
Can't comment on that, to be honest. It was that long ago, and as you can see how quick it's escalated, I think hence one of the times I come on and ask for no radio silence unless it's necessary for brevity reasons.
Right, can I go back to your, what appears from the spreadsheet certainly to be your first transmission, 7:20 and 56 seconds, page 4 of the spreadsheet. This appears to be your first transmission. Would you agree that this is the one where you say from India 4, control keep off, that somebody activated the emergency button? Is that the first transmission you made that day in relation to this incident?
Will be if that's articulated, yes.
Yeah. Can I ask you... Sorry.
Yeah, because it's only sort of we've only just arrived there previous to it, and as I said previously, we're still not fully aware of the landscape and what's happened. And from experience, some people get excited and they speak too long and they don't go for accuracy and brevity. So if it's not an immediate, succinct sort of update, I would ask to find out why we've sort of pressed the emergency button and just a wee bit more comprehensive update so we could get a better view of what's happened.
What information were you looking for in terms of an update?
Well, unless I'm reading it wrong and from memory, we still don't know fully what's happened.
So you would have wanted to know what was happening.
100%, yes.
And can I ask, you may have explained this already, but when you use the words control, keep off, what were
That's me.
you hoping to achieve by saying control, keep off?
We could find out who's pressed their button, why they've pressed their button, and same again to get a more formal, better update.
And you'll see from having listened to this that up until this point, there doesn't appear to have been a message from you seeking an ARV or a dog unit.
Yeah. Because as I said, Scott's either asked for it or I've heard it being asked for.
So perhaps it's just a simple mistake in your statement where you say that you asked
as I
for it.
said before, I'll stand corrected on that. I've maybe phoned ECR before I've left, or I've spoke to Scott on point of one when he's en route to say, I will join you. Obviously, he's a sergeant, you asked for it, so, and get it all sorted, I'll still be on the phone. But if it is a mistake, I'll stand corrected, but I'll be surprised if I didn't ask for it.
All right. Why would you be surprised?
Because as P.I.O, we have processes for every single incident, and due to the volume of calls that was coming in there, I would definitely look for these resources to be part of my strategy.
Thank you. If we could just briefly look at paragraph 66 of your inquiry statement.
Yep.
You mention that the officers are the eyes and the ears. Advice from me or Sergeant Maxwell might not fit the situation. There might be actually nothing ongoing, or there might be 2 people there, there might be 3. But you go along with the set protocol to make sure you do it professionally and correctly. And then that's where you need the sit reps or the updates. Everything's fluid and everything's dynamic and is forever changing. Could you explain what you mean when you say you go along with the set protocol? What's that?
Well, back to what I said, if you think it's a firearm incident with a firearm or a knife, the protocol would be go, have a look, but stay safe. ACR would get involved, they would take control, then the other tactics would come in. There's other set protocols where you might need the negotiator. There'll be other set protocols for bladed weapons, etc. So same again, everything we go to is not as it seems. So we have to get there, trust the officers to dynamically assess what's going on and feedback correctly so you can go into stage 2 or 3 of your planning.
And as far as you were concerned in your role, it was the officers who were the eyes and ears and would feed back more information to you.
Well, obviously I can't make any informed decisions if I'm not there.
Yeah. Right. I'm conscious of the time. Do you wish me to carry on since we started late?
I think perhaps you could carry on just now, yes.
Can I ask you what your expectations were as P.I.O. in relation to Sergeant Maxwell and any update from him?
I would expect them to go be professional, I would expect them to probably give me more information than required to make sure he didn't miss anything from any incident. I would expect him to give me more than I needed so I could make an informed judgment, and I could put whatever incident, I could put the next sort of stage into plan. Yeah, I would expect him basically to do his job professionally and not miss anything.
Thank you. When you made the transmission seeking an ambulance for PC Short, let's just look at that again. It's on page 6 of the spreadsheet, and it was at
Okay.
7:23:49.
Yep.
Was there any reason why you didn't also call for an ambulance for the person who had been restrained, Mr. P.I.O?
Just back to what I said, and the fact that I know that she was injured and somebody had asked for an ambulance, going on the DC Davison experienced DS who's told me the male's still under restraint. I obviously got one ambulance en route, or the information that was gleaned to me, bearing in mind not just the other male that was involved, there could have been members of the public or other officers injured, but as it stood at that stage, we knew there was one injury and there'd already been an ambulance requested.
Had you known at that time that Mr. P.I.O had been struck to the head with a baton, would you have considered calling for an ambulance for him as well as PC Short?
100%.
Why do you say that?
But there's a male succumbed to a blow to the head. So, I mean, he's not any different from PC Short. If they both had head blows, they'll both need checked over.
Had you known at that stage that he had been sprayed with CS and Pava spray, would you have also called for an ambulance for him?
Yeah, that would be protocol for me. We would ask him to walk about and clear it self-sufficiently with the wind, etc., as a recognised practice, but we'd definitely got an ambulance to check him over also.
We may have heard that a custody sergeant who receives a prisoner in the police office, if he's heard that someone's been sprayed or battened, they would automatically want that person to go and be checked over by a doctor. Is that your understanding?
I've not been in custody for a while, but if I was still a sergeant, as I would do, yeah, I would definitely follow that process.
So even if they're walking about, that's still something, medical attention is still something you would look for?
You have to think that's like phase 2 or phase 3. Either they're now a responsibility within the custody division. So I would imagine for a bit of comfort that they would check them out also. If it's not processed now, obviously I've been out a while, but I'd be surprised if it was not processed, but I would certainly be ensuring that everything was okay and getting one in, or at least the physician, the nurse physician that the force has.
Did you have any concerns at that time about the limited information that was being transmitted about the person who was being restrained by officers? Yes and no.
The no part, because I think you're looking at 2.5 to 3 minutes. That escalates so quick. And the fact that I still can't make an informed decision. I still not know the full landscape, but the sergeant's not there, then the DS turns up. We start to get a wee bit more information. Just with how rapid it escalated, and obviously, as you could imagine, I've not nearly wanted to come on the radio because I'm trusting who's there, because we can hardly hear a lot of the radio as it is.
So you said yes and no. Is there anything you want to add to that? You've talked about no because it was all happening very quickly. What was the yes?
Obviously, in normal situations, you would get a bit of update, and I can know what I'm reading. So, because it's happened so quick, but that's a yes. But no, understand how dynamic it was. That, as you can see by the articulation, there wasn't any sort of opportunity or chance to feed back into myself.
Thank you. Can I go back to you describing leaving Kirkcaldy Police Office, getting your kit and deciding to leave?
Yeah.
Or just something different. This could be an opportunity to take a break. So we'll take a break now. Yes, Ms. Graham.
Thank you. Hello, Mr. Kay. I'm back again. Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfectly.
Excellent. We were just going to move on to when you left the office, but I've been asked to check one thing with you. I think we have you transcribed as saying the ARV was linked to the PSU. And I want to double check that that's correct. Or did you mean maybe the ACR was linked to the PSU? Or did you mean the ARV was linked to the PSU?
Both. You've got an ARV who was linked to still doing the Gordon Brown sort of project, but also the PSU could sometimes link in with them. But if you were asking for one, obviously they would contact sort of everybody, if that makes sense.
And what was that link? Just mean, do you mean a
Well,
connection or a contact?
Yeah. The reason I didn't specifically say PSU at that time was A, we didn't know what we were facing yet, and B, they're obviously public disorder control, and we didn't have that yet either. So until we knew what we were facing, it would appear that there was definitely going to be a knife involved, hence the link for the ARV. But generally, an experienced inspector like Mr. Stewart would start in the background, finding out what else was available.
Thanks. Yeah, that's lovely. Thank you. Can we move on then and discuss you leaving Kirkcaldy Police Office? And if we look at paragraph 68 of your inquiry statement, you say that, we'll see that on the screen in a moment, 68, I heard Officer Down. If we could move up the screen slightly. It's the last line. I heard Officer Down and I left to get up there. So what you've said in your inquiry statement is once you heard the transmission, Officer Down, you basically got up and left Kirkcaldy Police Office. Is that correct?
Yeah, where is that about? Did you say 68?
You see paragraph 68, it starts at the bottom of page 12, but the part I've read out is actually at the top of page 13.
Okay.
You see that?
Yeah, obviously with how it was escalating and the number of the calls coming in, obviously knew it was quite serious then. When I heard Officer Down, obviously I went up there, apart from to be visible and show support for the actual incident, was to get a clearer understanding of what was happening.
Thank you. And by then you knew that an emergency button had been pressed and there's a transmission saying officer injured.
Yeah.
And so very quickly after that you got up to leave. Do you remember how long it took you to leave and get to Hayfield Road?
I would imagine anything for 7-8 minutes to 15.
Right.
It's quite a long walk from my office to the backyard.
Did
then
you?
to get a vehicle. Sorry?
No, I was going to say, did you walk? But I thought you'd taken the car or a vehicle.
Yeah, it would probably take me, I would imagine, 1 minute to 2 minutes to actually get to the backyard where the car is. Then obviously manoeuvre and manage the traffic. So same again, without checking, I would imagine 7-8 minutes to 12-15.
All right. And at paragraph 74 of your statement, you say that if we can just look at that.
Yeah.
The CID pretty much just beat me to the locus. And that was D.I. Robson, and we've heard about Samantha Davidson as well.
Yeah, I heard Samantha's obviously update, she would get back to me. Then obviously when Colin Robson, it gave me some comfort that we would probably have full control of the incident and the locus.
So when you're en route, you're still listening to the transmissions over the radio?
Yeah, we'd be on my car set.
If you look at page 6 of the spreadsheet, And if we look at 7:23 and 10 seconds,
Yep.
we've looked at this in relation to your transmission, but on the CCTV, we've heard evidence that a vehicle approached at this time and arrived and at Hayfield Road, and this was the 6th vehicle, and it contained Samantha Davidson and DS, I think, Connell. Yes. So that included Samantha Davidson, who's in the CID.
Yeah.
Was she there before you arrived?
Yeah, I believe so, yeah.
And then you'll see at 7:24, if we look at the entry relating to what can be seen in the CCTV, it says a 7th police vehicle arrives, a dark coloured vehicle approaches the roundabout from South Henry Road and appears to have some flashing lights at the rear window. And if we look at 7:23 on the evidence video timeline, I wonder if you can tell us. We'll play that. 7:23, maybe from 57 seconds or thereabouts. And I'll ask you to look at the video timeline, Mr. Kay, and maybe see if you recognise the vehicle. So this is a dark coloured vehicle approaching the roundabout from South Henry Road with flashing lights in the rear window. So I'll ask that be played for just a few seconds to see this vehicle.
Control, can you get an ambulance, please, for PC shot?
You see the vehicle arriving,
Roger.
lights in the back window. If we can just
Go ahead.
stop there. Did you recognise that vehicle?
No. There's every chance it could be an unmarked CID vehicle, but not known to me.
What vehicle did you arrive in?
I would imagine I would have had a marked car from the office.
What would that look like?
Oh, beat Panda car, response vehicle.
Would it have Police Scotland markings on the side?
Yeah, it would have full livery on the sides.
But roughly about 7 minutes from leaving Kirkcaldy Police Office to getting to Hayfield Road, I think you said.
Yeah, if you were driving past, it'd probably be 3 to 5 minutes, but by the time I walked down, that we got in the vehicle and negotiated the traffic, it would be a bit longer, I think.
Right. So once you arrived at Hayfield Road, who was present?
I think initially I spoke with Sammy Davidson and B.S. Maxwell.
Who was the senior
I'm sure.
Oh, sorry. Who was...
I think Colin Robson was away, so it would be both sergeants, and I'm sure one of the ambulances was away. So the DS and the sergeants were both equal rank, just different areas of work.
So we have heard evidence previously of when the ambulance arrived. And if you look at page 13 of the spreadsheet, towards the top of that page, you'll see that the ambulance arrived and was seen on the CCTV at 7:33:46, 35 to 46. It says ambulance arrives at Hayfield Road. That's page 13 of the combined audio and video timeline.
Yeah. Yep, I can see it, yeah.
Do you see that? So
Yeah.
7:33 and 35 seconds the ambulance arrives, and then at 7:37 on page 14 it says That's the Samantha Davidson says that's the male on the stretcher, and he's going to be going to the hospital. So when you arrived, was the ambulance had actually left Hayfield Road?
I actually think the ambulance with the officer had left, and the second one was just in the process of leaving.
We've heard that, in fact, Nicole Short travelled to the hospital herself with another colleague and wasn't taken in an ambulance.
Okay. Yeah, we would arrange transport and we would have officers go with both, probably not connected to the initial attendance.
So let's have a look at page 13 again, or page 12 first of all. Page 12, you'll see that there's an airways transmission from you at 7:33:14, and it says India 4 to DS Davidson. And then you have a discussion with DS Davidson. Sammy, are you needing a hand from road policing or any other units? Do we need roads closed off? And then Samantha Davidson has said, position at the moment, we're doing the road closure, ambulance is just approaching Locus, is getting them put in situ. Where were you when that conversation was going on?
I would imagine I was not far away. I obviously can't answer to where identical I was.
But you weren't at the scene at that time?
No.
Because you were
I'm still
on,
with
that
you.
conversation was
Yeah,
on the radio. And then on the following page, page 13,
Yep.
D.I. Robson makes contact with you at 7:33. See towards the top of that
Yep.
page, Inspector K from D.I. Robson, and you say go ahead. And then Robson says, I'm just going to attend here, I'm going to initiate locus protection measures, the natural boundaries, traffic management, that type of thing. And then Maxwell at 7:34 says ambulance at Locus.
Yep.
Who was the senior officer in charge of the scene prior to your arrival?
Well, going by rank, it would be Colin Robson. Bearing in mind this kind of incident would be handed over to the crime division anyway, so he would be, as per process, the highest rank in there. Then it would be the two DSs, the two sergeants. So Colin Robson at that time.
Colin Robson would be the most senior officer in terms of rank, and then DS Davidson and Acting Police Sergeant Maxwell.
Yeah.
And would Davidson have more seniority than Maxwell because Maxwell was an acting police sergeant?
Not necessarily. I mean, she's got a different expertise. We've been in the crime division. But Scott was just as capable of doing anything that Sammy could do. If it was going down more specialised crime related, then she would have more experience. But at the time, I don't think she would have been in any better position than Scott.
Right. And if we look at page 14, do we actually see at 7:37:09 that you have an airwaves transmission? I'll be there in about 2 minutes.
Yep.
And then for completeness, at 7:40:54, which is on page 15 of the spreadsheet,
Yeah.
that's you saying, yes, that's me, just arrived.
Yeah.
So you're there, you've heard officer injured at 7:20. On page 4 of the spreadsheet is 7:21:02, and that's you arriving at 7:40.
Yeah.
Sorry, 7. let me just be clear. That's you arriving at 7:40 and 54 seconds, which we see on page 15.
Yeah.
Once you arrive, who's the most senior officer at the scene?
It'll go by role specific. Once I got there, it would be my responsibility to secure locus, get the boundaries in place, get extra staff and remove staff in. Then I would obviously speak with the CID about moving forward, and obviously by the way it was going, I would get handed over to them or the MIT or a specialised department.
So do you take over when you arrive in terms of managing the scene and what's happening there?
Yeah, but if Colin Robson has got things in place, I mean, he's a very good officer and extremely capable, now a chief inspector. So if he's done the basics and got everything, I would just be fluid and take on from there.
What do you mean by the basics?
Well, if he's put on the locus protection, I mean, that's a main arterial route towards the hospital. So if he's kind of blocked it off to preserve the integrity of locus or the scene, and he's made sure that everything's under control as best could be, I would thereafter look at what was happening and the next stages.
Right. We can take the evidence video timeline off the screen. So at the time you arrive, can we look at your operational statement? This is the undated statement at page 3.
Okay.
And this is PS 00345, page 3.
Yep.
And you say that you were briefed by Davidson and Maxwell on arrival at the locus. That's, if we can call it, paragraph 3.
Okay.
And are they briefing you because of your role as P.I.O?
Yeah.
And you were then further briefed by Sergeant Maxwell. And can you tell us what was happening at the time you arrived in relation to the restraint of Mr. P.I.O?
That was all finished by the time I got there.
So the ambulance had removed Mr. P.I.O by the time you got there?
No, I'm sure he was in the ambulance and the paramedics were doing what they do, and I'm sure, yeah, and I'm more than positive that was the case, and I got briefed on their version of what happened.
Right, can I ask you, staying at page 3 of your operational statement, it's around halfway down. My paragraph 4, maybe paragraph 5, but it starts, PCs Smith, Walker, McDonough, Good, Payton and Gibson were initially involved in trying to restrain the male. Is this the briefing that Sergeant Maxwell gave you?
Yeah, he's obviously, when I've got there, him and Sammy's made me aware that obviously PC shot and the male were obviously what had happened, being conveyed to hospital in separate vehicles. CID had went with one of them. They'd put the locus on common approach path, started barriers, etc. Then obviously, I'm presuming Sammy would do her own thing. Then Scotty's obviously, I'm his boss on the day, so I'd say to him what's probably happened then. He's probably gave me a further, wee bit more detailed about what the officer's involvement was.
I'm sorry, Mr. Kay, I was going to move on, but I've been asked if we may pause proceedings at this moment. Certain people are having difficulty accessing the correct document, the operational statement, and I wonder if we could just have a moment to, if possible, yes.
Mr. Kay, I think your feed will be cut off briefly, but don't go away because we'll come back to you.
No, that's fine.
That's a problem.
Ms. Graham.
Thank you. I hadn't appreciated that because the witness is giving evidence remotely, that the large screens did not show the documents that I was referring to. They only appear on the smaller screens.
I see.
So I'll make sure that I explain what's in the document,
Thank you.
if I may. So let's go back, Mr. Kay, to the statement, the undated operational statement. We were on page 3 and we were looking at the briefing that was given to you by Sergeant Maxwell. And do you have that in front of you? And it's roughly paragraph 4. And I'll read this out. You were further briefed by Acting Police Sergeant Maxwell that PCs Smith, Walker, McDonough, Good, Payton and Gibson were initially involved in trying to restrain the male. This involved the officers holding the male down by asserting their body weight onto the male at various points, which is a recognised method of gaining control. PC Payton appeared to be suffering from shock and after effects of the PAVA and CS spray deployed. You told us earlier this morning that you prepared this statement within a week of the events of the 3rd of May 2015.
Yeah.
Looking at this paragraph now, do you recall if this is the wording that was used by Acting Police Sergeant Maxwell when he briefed you that day?
I couldn't answer that, sorry.
Right. Do you have any recollection of whether it is an estimation of the briefing you were given or whether that is your interpretation of the briefing that was given?
It will be my interpretation, but I'd be confident it will be as close to what he's described to me.
Thank you. You then say that Acting Police Sergeant Maxwell further informed me that the male ran at officers and was given the command to stop and get back. After a similar command and the male refusing, officers deployed their PAVA and CS spray, but the male displayed no effects and did not stop, and kicked PC short to the ground by swiping her legs, thereafter kicking her to the head. The male was restrained with handcuffs and leg restraints were applied. Again, can I ask you if that is the wording that was used by Acting Police Sergeant Maxwell, or it's a summary of what your understanding of the briefing was?
Yeah, same answer. My form of words from the framework he's gave me, but I would expect it to be 100% accurate if I've committed it to paper.
So in terms of 100% accurate, you mean that what you've recorded is what you were told?
Yeah, so if what I believe's happened, I would have written down, or I wouldn't have written it.
And your belief in that regard is not because you witnessed any of this, but because that's what you've been told by Acting Police Sergeant Maxwell?
Yeah.
I should say, Mr. Kay, that we've heard that this summary would not be an accurate version of what we've heard evidence about actually happened.
Yeah, I wouldn't dispute that. Emotions were running high, and it was 7.5 years ago, but if I've committed that to paper in my statement, that would be, I would believe that's what he said to me. If that's changed, I mean, that doesn't affect what I've written down, in my opinion.
And were you doing your best to write down what you'd been told that day when you arrived at the scene?
Yeah, because I used to deal with complaints, as I touched on before. So I know, me personally, having a wee bit of pride, I would always try and do any form of statement close to the event, so things wouldn't get lost.
Thank you. Moving on to the next paragraph, you say he also stated, so again this refers to Maxwell, that officers were aware of the dangers of positional asphyxia, especially PC Smith, who is an officer safety instructor. The male was placed within the recovery position. Acting Police Sergeant Maxwell also stated that PC Tomlinson claimed he may have struck the male on the head with his police issue baton. So you were briefed at that time by Maxwell about the actions of PC Tomlinson and that he may have struck the male on the head with his baton. Is that correct? And again,
Yeah.
was that what you were told by Maxwell?
Yeah.
Could I ask you to look briefly at the spreadsheet again? Let's look at page 8, please. And I'd like you to look at the 7:26 and 52 seconds entry. 7:26 and 52 seconds on page 8 of the spreadsheet. And again, I'll read this out, although you will also be able to see it on the screen. On the hard copy you have in front of you. It says, it's an airwaves transmission by Scott Maxwell. Just for the log, the initial on attendance, this male's attacked PC Short quite violently. As a result, he was sprayed with CS and PAVA and battened. There may be a suggestion that he has been battened to the head area, 4-1 over. From what you've told us earlier, at 7:26, you were en route to Hayfield Road.
Yeah.
You left at 7:21 when you heard officer injured, and you arrived at 7:40. So you were en route to Hayfield Road at that time. When you were en route, did you hear the airwaves transmission by Maxwell that the man may have been battened to the head area?
I couldn't answer that, sorry.
Do you have any recollection of hearing that as you were heading to the scene?
No.
When you arrived, you were briefed by Maxwell that Tomlinson claimed he may have struck the male on the head with his police issue baton. So at the latest, by the time you arrived and were briefed by Maxwell, you knew about the man being possibly having been struck to the head. Why did you not call for an ambulance for the man at that point?
Well, if he's briefed me then, the male would be in the ambulance or en route to the hospital. So it would be too late.
So by the time you arrived, you had the ambulance had left the scene. So Mr. P.I.O was being dealt with by medics at that time. As
Yeah,
far as you
so
were
that would be
aware.
retrospective and it wouldn't fit the timeline.
Thank you. Can I ask you now about locus protection?
Yeah.
What is the purpose of locus protection?
So obviously that was on the main arterial route to the hospital, so it is busy. So keep members of the public out, keep members of the public safe, and also to protect the integrity of the scene, to recover any evidence required or for cross-contamination.
Who was in charge of locus protection?
The CID initially put on for we to get there, but once that kind of was in place, it would then pass over to me. And when I removed officers from the locus, I got supplementary officers unconnected to the inquiry to come in and do it.
Was that something that you organised personally?
Yeah, so that was part of my initial role, as I said to you, for the day-to-day business. So I would bring in other officers from within the area, and thereafter it would be the other sergeant who would look after locus as well.
When you were at the scene, were you aware of any officers doing point-to-point?
No.
Can we look at your inquiry statement again, please, and look at paragraph 89? You say here that I thereafter got them to restrict the call card. I would do that anyway, but also basically for third-party trauma, because there was a few officers that were working that day that their partners were in the police or were probably or possibly even working. What do you mean you restricted the call card?
If I restrict the call card, I give certain individuals access to it. It means any officer could go into the storm and look at all call cards, and as they can do from other areas, they just put in the demographic sort of point for that area. So obviously because of the seriousness of the incident, I restricted it, but also for third party trauma, because I'm sure 2 or 3 of the officers and on duty at that time, their partners were working elsewhere in the division, and some had parents who were in the police. So obviously I wasn't wanting that to be made aware at that time.
When you restricted the call card, who does that limit access to the call card to?
Whoever I give it to. Obviously the ACR can't see it. Then I would give it to D.I. Robson. I would have gave Gary McEwen it to start with, and I would have allowed Nicola Shepherd to view it the next time she came back on duty, with it being her area.
So is that restricted to more senior officers?
Yeah, definitely.
Do you remember when you restricted the call card?
Same again, not 100% accurate, but I would like to think at Locus, or maybe as soon as I go back to the office.
How long were you at Hayfield Road?
I couldn't answer that, to be honest. No, I couldn't give you a time frame for that.
I'd like to move on to ask you about arrangements for the officers going back to Kirkcaldy Police Office.
Yeah.
Ms Graham, it's now just coming up to 1 o'clock. I think perhaps we should stick to the lunchtime arrangements. Mr Kay, we're going to stop for lunch now, and we'll be starting again at 2 o'clock. So if you're available to come back on screen at 2 o'clock, please.
Okay.